Hi everyone and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland. These are my favourite non-historical fiction books of 2023. I'll link my previous video down below, but basically I just thought it was too many for one video, so I made two. This list I've split into four and I have two books, and I have two books for each category. So there's classics, non-fiction, fantasy and contemporary. So yes, I hope you enjoy it. Let me know if you've read any of these books. So for the classics, I didn't have a huge classics reading this year, but I did read two that I would like to mention in this video. My favourite classic of the year has to be, and it's the only book that I read twice within 2023, which shows how much I liked it and how much of a comfort read it was, and that is The Making of a Marchioness by Sherlock. You're so inconvenient. Sherlock, go and sit on the couch. Come on, darling. And that was The Making of a Marchioness by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is a 20th century classic, and it follows this impoverished gentlewoman called Emily Fox Seton, who's kind of a paid companion to this lady. She's living in very kind of poor conditions, but she doesn't let that bring her down. She's a very upbeat kind of person that everybody adores, and through various circumstances she ends up becoming engaged to this much older man, basically as a way to get her out of her situation. And yeah, it's just such a sweet book. Like, Emily is such a lovely character, definitely a new comfort read for me. It's published by Persephone Classic, but I've also listened to an audiobook, and yeah, I just love it. The second half does tip very much into melodrama, but yeah, it's still comforting melodrama, and the ending always makes me laugh for unintended reasons. But yes, I know Frances Hodgson Burnett has lots of other adult fiction. This year I really must read some more of it. So the second classic then, unfortunately, I also don't have a physical copy of, and that's A Drama in Muslin by George Moore. So it's an Irish Victorian classic. It was my first George Moore and I was absolutely delighted to read it. So it follows these two sisters as they finish school in a convent abroad and then come back to their family estate in Ireland, and the kind of people they know there, they're kind of landed very much into the middle of arguments about the land wars and the kind of violence around that, and how concerned all of the Irish upper class are about this. But you also do get perspectives from the Irish tenants as well, but it mainly follows the two sisters and their struggle to find love or not, and they go up to the season in Dublin, and just, yeah, it was just really interesting because all this is in an Irish setting. There was an unrequited lesbian relationship in it as well, which was really interesting to read for a book of its age, and also this book was just really funny sometimes. It was just really witty, and yeah, I definitely did laugh out loud at moments. But yeah, I haven't read many Irish Victorian classics, but I definitely will be reading more, and definitely more George Moore. Like this book, and I know it's not the only one of his that does this, dealt with such like really unconventional topics, atheism and lesbian relationships, like I said, and becoming pregnant outside marriage, and yeah, it was just really fascinating, and one of the main characters has writing ambitions, so yeah, it was just a really brilliant novel and I really recommend it. So on to the non-fiction then, and the first book I'm going to talk about is Uproar by Alice Loxton, Satire, Scandal and Printmakers in Georgian London, and very excitingly my copy is actually signed by Alice herself. I went to see a talk by her at the London Print Fair in March, and she was really lovely, I'm happy to report. I'm a big fan of her Instagram channel, History Alice, and yeah, she's just really entertaining, and the whole book is written like this. It's just so imaginative and like fun to read. She'll like create situations and put words in figures' mouths. Like, obviously, you know, these conversations didn't happen, but it just makes them so funny to read, and she'll kind of take the reader along. It's like, oh, now we're in Fleet Street in a misty morning, whatever. It was much better than that, but that kind of way. And it was just, yeah, it's just a great way to learn about some of the ridiculous things that happened in the Regency period, and the way she pokes fun of it as the printmakers of the time did. They were kind of the comic strips of their day. I opened up a random page. The most epic demonstration of his profligacy, the Prince Regent, came when the prince finally became king. After sinking public money into the furnishings and renovations of Carlton House for 30 years, he gave up on the project and pulled the whole place down. So yeah, it was just, there were many ridiculous things that happened in the Regency period, and this book tells them wonderfully. So two of the most famous printmakers of the day were Thomas Rowlandson and James Gilray, and I've often seen like prints for sale in London and things, but I haven't bought any for James Gilray, but I actually found these second hand in Ireland, which I'm very excited to have. There are two prints of four, the other two are missing, by Thomas Rowlandson, and they're from 1785, so they're the oldest thing in the house and the only thing I think I have from the Regency period. So as you can see, they're not in very good condition, but this first one, I absolutely love this one, though it doesn't really tell the story without the rest of them. But yeah, it's just these two young ladies and their mother at the theatre, so the frame obviously isn't from 1785, so I'll probably get remounted when my house is built and I have somewhere to display them. But that's the first one. This one is in better condition, and I suppose it's more of a like more of an indication of kind of the way that these prints were like satirizing things. But yeah, you can see these two ladies again and their mother chaperoning them, but then this gentleman in the background is ogling, instead of ogling the opera or the play, he's ogling the girls. So yeah, just that kind of light humour that was in those prints. But I really enjoy those, and I'm delighted to have them, and it's just so exciting to have something from the Regency period in my house. The other non-fiction I want to mention then is like one of the few non-history non-fictions that I have read, and I really must read more because I really enjoyed this, and that is Worn: A People's History of Clothing by Sophie Tannhauser. So it's kind of a history of the different types of fabrics that humans have worn throughout history, the way they were produced historically, kind of the way they were scaled up for today's kind of production, and unfortunately the damage that has on like the communities that have produced them historically, and the environment obviously being a very concerning one. So this was a really sobering read, there's no way around it really, but it's one I thought was really important. I have very much tried to cut down my own clothes buying in recent years, and I think it's something that everybody should try to do. The impacts in this book that are described from the likes of cotton production and silk, the silk section was so depressing, I have to say, that it will soon be no longer possible to grow silk traditionally, because all of the place that they could grow mulberry trees is gone. So yeah, like there was a slight light at the end of the tunnel, but it was a bit up in the air for me. But I think definitely the solution is to just try and buy less ourselves. It's all we can do, and try and do better. But yeah, it's a global view. Like it's just, she goes through so many interviews with people from all different backgrounds, like the people that own the factories, farmers, people are just, I suppose, trying to keep their own businesses afloat and things. So yeah, just really eye-opening book, and I'll definitely be trying to read more about this kind of thing, as difficult as it is. So on to the fantasy. I think I only read 2 fantasy books this year, which would be normal for me, and both of them have made it onto the list. So I suppose I would like to say that would tell me something, but I think it's just like I picked these 2 up because I had very specific reasons for doing so. So the first I want to talk about is Babel by R.F. Kuang. Very highly hyped book, and oh my god, completely deserved. So this is about Robin Swift, who is brought from Canton by this Oxford professor, and he basically takes him on under his guardianship with the whole purpose of sending him to Babel, this the Institute of Translation in Oxford University. This is set in the Georgian period, so yeah, historical fiction / fantasy, which is why I picked it up. In this Institute of Translation, there are lots of people from all around the British Empire, because the whole background of this book is this thing called silver working. So it's basically the idea that like language and translation has this power that can be harnessed to do like magic type things, and the people at the Institute of Translation in Oxford are really good at it, so they're basically a really important part of the empire. So yes, Robin is in this group of like 4 students, his kind of first year cohort, and 2 of them are other people from around the British Empire, and then there's a girl called Letty, who's a white girl from somewhere else in England. So the 4 of them develop like a strong friendship, because it's so intense, the course, I suppose, but they also have some complications with that. But yeah, this is such a dark academia book, but like an emphasis on the dark, I suppose. Like there is really this idea of really idealized academic setting where you know, Oxford is such a great background from somebody who hasn't studied there, obviously, for novels and things. It does always seem like this idealized academic world where you can just pursue knowledge for knowledge's sake, but also this book very much shows the like dark underbelly of imperialism that is basically the basis of all this silverworking power and how it's being used in things, and then how the students at the institute, including Robin, feel about this. So yeah, it was just such a complicated and brilliant book. This book will always be special for me as well because Margaret Pinard over her channel was kind enough to invite me for a live discussion about this, and yeah, we just had a great chat about it, so you should go and check that out if you're interested in hearing more. But yeah, if you haven't picked up this book yet, I'd really highly encourage it. And the other fantasy book then is Myrta by Christopher Paolini. So the kind of book snob in me made me hesitant to actually include this in my favourite books of the year, which is ridiculous, but like I definitely can say this is like the best written book of the year that I've read, or like you know, anything like that. But I was a big fan of the Inheritance series when I was younger. It was like one of the few fantasy series that I did read. It's like a coming of age young adult novel about this guy called Eragon, who a dragon hatches for him, so he becomes a dragon rider, and there's this kind of empire that he has to try and overthrow. The most simplistic summary up of it ever, but that's basically the basis. But Myrta was kind of not a side character, but you know, he was a character in that book that had a complicated ending. So this book takes up his thread after the series of main novels. I just thought it was such a good sequel. I just enjoyed it so much. Just returning to this world. Myrta was my favourite character in the original series, so it was great to hear more about him in the canon, and I just thought this book did open up so much more potential for more books in the series. And I think definitely, like, Christopher Paolini was quite young when he wrote the original books, so I feel like the Myrta in this book, and especially his relationship with Thorn, was much more complicated and well written than the original relationship between Eragon and Saphira, which is more straightforward. So yeah, if you've been hesitating to pick up this book, or if you hadn't read the series for a long time, I definitely would just go ahead and do it. It's nice to read the other series again, but beforehand I'd read it I think 3 or 4 years ago, so I didn't bother. But there is enough summary given that you can remember what happens. But but I don't think it was too burdensome after the first few chapters. You know, there was a bit of reminding at the first few chapters, but it wasn't too bad after that. So yeah, brilliant book, and I think it does deserve a place in my favourite books of the year. So on to the 2 contemporary books, in very broad category, I know. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Brood by Jackie Paulson. So I don't know if I'd recommend this to everybody. What drew me to this book is that there is a picture of 4 hens in the front. We do have hens. We have 4 hens at the moment, just like this book. They're not as diverse colours. They're ex-battery hens, so they're all just look very much like the normal red hen. But it kind of follows this unnamed woman and just the normal things in her life as she looks after her hens, tries to keep them alive. Anybody that has hens knows that that's easier said than done sometimes, from predators and from disease. Hens very kind of famously, and it's so sad really, the pecking order is such a strong thing. They like hide any illness they have until the last possible minute. So they are funny little creatures. So yeah, the most strong theme in this book, apart from the hens, is the author's infertility. So I suppose there's a whole kind of metaphor around the hens and that, but I mostly just enjoyed it for the hens. Like it's just all their little quirky personalities. Definitely I would say that the author has much less faith in the intelligence of hens than I have. She thinks that they don't remember her from day to day at all. And she's like, oh, every snow was the hen's first snow. Now, I don't know if they can remember back to last year, but they in this book it snows every day, and she thinks she don't remember it from the day before. I don't know, but no, I just really loved it, and she definitely did have such affection for each one without it being like sugary sweet. Like, she had affection in a very like realistic way, which I think really chimed with me as well. She definitely knows that they're still hens, like she doesn't treat them like humans or anything. So yeah, I just really love this book. I don't know if other people would love this book as much if they didn't know about hens or had never had hens, but yeah, it was definitely a highlight of the year for me. And finally then, funnily enough, the last book I'm going to talk about is also about animals, and that's Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. So I'd heard this so much about this on BookTube before, and I finally picked it up and I'm so glad I did. So it's about this scientist called Inti, who comes to the Scottish Highlands from America, and she's working on this project with some others to try and reintroduce wolves to Scotland as part of kind of a rewilding effort and to control, say, the deer population so the trees have room to grow and all that. So I really loved the discussion about rewilding. If you're not kind of sure, I hadn't read any non-fiction about it or anything, but this really got me thinking and seeing kind of wider viewpoints. There was loads of local opposition, which this book deals with plenty, and yeah, it just shows how the projects to try and bring things into balance and how that works. But apart from the whole wolves thing, which was brilliant in itself, the Inti also has a very complicated past, and when she comes to Scotland she actually becomes involved with this police officer, and they actually become involved with this family that has some trouble going on as well, and kind of how that suspicions around that and things. So yeah, I just thought it was a really brilliant book, and I just really recommend it, as I do every book on this list. So yes, that is it for all my favourite books of 2023. There were a few that were like pretty close to the cut, but I think this is probably more than I should have had in the first place. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know if you read any of these. And yes, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next BookTube video.